You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Hi, I'm Jay Farner, CEO of Quicken Loans, America's largest mortgage lender. Spring will be here soon, so if buying a new home is on your to-do list, right now is the time to call Quicken Loans. Learn about which mortgage options make sense for you and get a jump on your competition. With our exclusive Rate Shield approval, the low rate you lock today is protected for up to 90 days while you shop for your new home. With a Rate Shield approval, if rates go up, your low rate stays locked. But if rates go down, you get that new, even lower rate. Either way, you win. Talk to us today at 800-QUICKEN or go to rocketmortgage.com to take advantage. Here's another great reason to work with us. For a record 9 years in a row, J.D. Power has ranked Quicken Loans highest in the nation in customer satisfaction for primary mortgage origination. Again, to lock in today's low mortgage interest rate and get the security of our exclusive Rate Shield approval, call us today at 800-QUICKEN or go to rocketmortgage.com.
For J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com. Rate Shield approval only valid on certain 30-year fixed-rate loans. Call for cost information and conditions. Equal housing lender. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLS number 3030.
Hi, welcome to this Subway ad for the new Sesame Ginger Glazed Chicken Signature Wrap. How would you like it?
I'll take a...
Sports announcer at home?
Yeah, how'd you...
We just know.
My wife picks up the new Signature Wrap. It's got double the rotisserie-style chicken mixed with a sesame ginger glaze. She appears annoyed at me, but she shrugs it off. Those sweet and savory flavors are calling her name. She lifts the wrap and she takes the bite! Incredible! And now she's closing the door on my... Subway, make it what you want.
Limited time only at participating restaurants. Double meat based on average 6-inch sub.
I'm little teapot, short and stout.
Here is my handle and here is my spout.
No, Dad, like this. When I get all steamed up, then I shout, tip me over and pour me out.
This is WWE superstar Roman Reigns. It only takes a moment to make a moment. Take time to be a dad today.
Visit fatherhood.gov, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
It's the refreshingly non-political podcast about everything else.
I'm Alan Ray, and I do this for free. It is refreshingly non-political podcast about everything else. I am your humble host, Alan Ray. We got a fun show lined up for you today. We've got alien bacteria. We have Cold War projects that really turned out to be interesting. Brain nerd stuff. You name it, we got it. Don't go anywhere. We're going to have a fun one. assumed I do this for free. I'm your humble host, Alan Ray. Beautiful, beautiful Friday. Little cold, and I know some of you guys were ducking and covering all week from some inclement weather. Hope you're safe. I hope this Friday finds you in a good mood, gearing up for the weekend. It was St. Patrick's Day this week. I hope you've recovered from that. St. Patrick's Day has really become quite the celebration, and that was Wednesday, wasn't it? Yeah, it sure was. Yeah, because I work afternoons now, it's just another day for me. Used to be, back when I was, before everything was shut down, locked down, and everybody was afraid of each other, Friday, the St. Patrick's Day would be a day that I would probably have a gig somewhere and watch people sick themselves out on green beer and all this stuff. Life changes. Things are different now. We are, my guitar player, Rick, and I, we've had a couple of conversations over the past few weeks. We're getting ready to gear up a whole different kind of show. It's not just going to be acoustic anymore. So once we start touring again, once we start hitting these shows again, hitting these places again, we're going to do something a lot more interesting. But, being St. Patrick's Day, I have to give a little head nod to St. Patrick's and what it is. And, of course, I had to do a little research. And because I like my lists, deal with it, I found 7 surprising facts about St. Patrick's Day. Number 1, this is from the History Channel. This is, I missed the History Channel actually showing history shows. It used to be such a good thing to sit and watch, and now they just show really weird stuff that I don't think has anything to do with history. But anyway, number 1, the real St. Patrick was born in Britain. Much of what is known about St. Patrick's life has been interwoven with folklore and legend. Historians generally believe that St. Patrick, the patron saint of Ireland, was born in Britain, not Ireland. And it was near the end of the 4th century. At age 16, he was kidnapped by Irish raiders. And he was sold as a slave to a priest in Northern Ireland. After toiling for 6 years as a shepherd, he escaped back to Britain. Yep, we have a train going through. That's right. He eventually returned to Ireland as a Christian missionary. Number 2, there were no snakes around for St. Patrick to banish from Ireland. Among the legends associated with St. Patrick is that he stood atop an Irish hillside and banished snakes from Ireland, prompting all serpents to slither away into the sea. In fact, research suggests snakes never occupied the Emerald Isle in the first place. There are no signs of snakes in the country's fossil record, and water has surrounded Ireland since the last glacial period. Before that, the region was covered in ice and would have been too cold for the reptiles. Number 3, leprechauns. Leprechauns are likely based on the Celtic fairies. The red-haired, green-clothed leprechaun is commonly associated with St. Patrick's Day. The original Irish name for these figures of folklore is Loberson, meaning small-bodied fellow. Belief in leprechauns likely stems from Celtic beliefs in fairies, tiny men and women who could use their magical powers to serve good or evil. In Celtic folklores, leprechauns were cranky souls responsible for mending the shoes of other fairies. Yeah, you ain't go around smelling other people's dirty shoes all day. That'd make me cranky. Number 4, the shamrock was considered a sacred plant. The shamrock, a 3-leaf clover, has been associated with Ireland for centuries. It was called the shamroy by the Celts and was considered a sacred plant that symbolized the arrival of spring. According to legend, St. Patrick used the plant as a visual guide when explaining the Holy Trinity. By the 17th century, the shamrock had become a symbol of emerging Irish nationalism. Number 5, the first St. Patrick's Day parade was held in America. While people in Ireland had celebrated St. Patrick since the 1600s, the tradition of a St. Patrick's Day parade began in America and actually predates the founding of the United States. Records show that a St. Patrick's Day parade was held on March 17th, 1601, in a Spanish colony in what is now St. Augustine, Florida. The parade and a St. Patrick's Day celebration a year earlier were organized by the Spanish colony Irish vicar Ricardo Artur. More than a century later, homesick Irish soldiers serving in England military marched in Boston in 1737 and in New York on March 17th. Enthusiasm for St. Patrick's Day parades in New York City, Boston, and other early American cities only grew from there. In 20 and 21, parades throughout the country, including in New York City and Boston, were canceled or postponed for the first time in decades due to the Rona. Number 6, and this is kind of common knowledge for people who actually study history. The Irish were once scorned in America. While Irish Americans are now proud to showcase their heritage, the Irish were not always celebrated by fellow Americans. Beginning in 1845, a devastating potato blight caused widespread hunger throughout Ireland. While approximately 1 million perished, another 2 million abandoned their land in the largest single population movement of the 19th century. Most of the exiles, nearly a quarter of the Irish nation, came to the shores of the United States. Once they arrived, the Irish refugees were looked down upon as disease-ridden, unskilled, and a drain on welfare budgets. And finally, number 7, corned beef and cabbage was an American innovation. The meal that became a St. Patrick's Day staple across the country, corned beef and cabbage, was an American innovation. While ham and cabbage were eaten in Ireland, corned beef offered a cheaper substitute for impoverished migrants. Irish Americans living in the slums of Lower Manhattan in the late 19th century and early 20th purchased leftover corned beef from ships returning from the sea trade in China. The Irish would boil the beef 3 times, the last time with cabbage, to remove some of the brine. And now you know 7 things about St. Patrick's Day that you may not have known before listening to I Do This for Free. Congratulations, you're just a little bit smarter. Doesn't work for me, hopefully it works for you. What else you want to talk about today? Oh, I know. There's new bacteria lurking on the International Space Station. It's really no space oddity, but there's 4 species of bacteria, and this is according to The Guardian. 4 species of bacteria, 3 of them previously unknown to science, have been discovered on board the International Space Station, begging questions about how they got there and how they have managed to survive. Now, their discovery may also bolster future efforts to cultivate crops during long spaceflight missions, since related species are known to promote the growth of plants and help them fight off pathogens. Now, new bacteria were identified from swabs of various locations inside the ISS. One was discovered on a dining room table, another on an overhead panel in a research area used to study low gravity, and the third in a cupola observatory. The 4th species, which was already known of, was found on an old air purifying filter, which had been returned to Earth. All of them are rod-shaped bacteria belonging to a species that I can't even try to. Let me try to say this. Methylobacteriaceae family. Basically, it's usually found in soil and fresh water where they help to promote plant growth and defend against pathogens. So these things have been surviving in space. One of the bacteria was deliberately put on the outside of the ISS. It's basically the Deinococcus bacteria, listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the world's toughest bacteria. It survived on the space station surface for 3 years. They were deliberately placed there to test the panspermia theory, that life exists throughout the universe and may be transported between planets by space dust, asteroids, comets, or even contaminated spacecrafts. So what it all boils down to with that particular one is by visiting Mars, we may be inadvertently planting new life. That's an interesting thing. So they're not alien. All of the bacteria have been basically studied, researched, put under the microscope. They all come from the planet. They got there probably by people going back and forth, equipment going back and forth. And as much as they try to sterilize and sanitize all this stuff, you're not going to get all the bacteria. And some of it has grown, some of it has developed, some of it has found a way to live, or what do they say? Life finds a way. Yeah, that's kind of how it works. Very important studying this bacteria, especially because it has a lot to do with plant life, has a lot to do with keeping plants alive. If we are going to Mars, we are going to need a way not only to grow some kind of crops, keep ourselves, if we're going to colonize Mars or at least stay there, we got to have sustainability. If this bacteria grows in these kind of conditions, it's safe to say that it's going to grow on the trip to Mars, grow in whatever we decide to put on Mars to live in, and really, honestly, possibly be a way to grow plants for the trip, grow plants when we get there. And of course, we know that plants are necessary for oxygen. So that would take some of the issues of long-term oxygen sustainability away. Interesting stuff. Space nerd stuff. Nerd alert. All right. What else we got? What other things are there? We got quite a bit going on. Speaking of weird bacteria and plant life. And I was looking, this is from all places, the Business Insider. During the Cold War, of course, you may or may not know this. Nerds like me do know this. There was a project called Project Iceworm in Greenland. In Greenland, what happened was during the peak of the Cold War, the United States wanted to place short-term missile bases right outside the Soviet Union's door. Iceland was a really good place. What they wanted to do was build these bases under the ice, so they couldn't be seen by a satellite, couldn't be detected, but they were there. Well, they went up there, scientists, research, the military went up there, and they basically studied the ice and the flow and patterns and stuff like that, decided it was far too dangerous because every 2 years the ice is moving considerably. It's always in a state of flux up there. So, yeah, they abandoned the situation. However, the work wasn't entirely fruitless. Since geologists held on to samples of ancient soil from roughly 4,500 feet below the surface of the ice, the frozen chunks were stored in glass cookie jars for 5 decades, until researchers at the University of Vermont got a hold of them, thawed the chunks, and began to rinse the sediment in the lab. Now, this is from 4,500 feet under the surface of the ice. In doing so, one of the researchers, Paul Bierman, suddenly turned to his colleague, Andrew Christ, and said, "What is that stuff floating in the water?" Chris sucked up the floating specks with a pipette and then placed them under a microscope. And then he said, "It was amazing," he told the Business Insider. "There were these delicate little twigs and leaves that just started to unfurl when they were wet. They are all so well preserved that they look like they just died yesterday." The researchers knew that plants couldn't grow if the ice sheet was present, so they calculated the material's age based on the rate of decay of isotopes in the soil. Their results suggested there must have been an ice-free period in the region far more recently than scientists previously believed. In a new study, they suggest that Greenland's ice sheets melted and reformed at least once in the last million years. Before that, scientists thought the current ice sheet had been there for around 3 million years. Chris said, "Paul and I were totally ecstatic. We were jumping around in the lab." Scientists first collected the frozen soil samples from northwestern Greenland in 1966. At the time, the samples gave researchers a never-before-seen peek at Earth's ancient climate. That was the first time anyone had drilled that deep into an ice sheet before, let alone recovered whatever's at the bottom. But in the 1960s, scientists didn't have the technology to determine the age of the soil. Now, researchers know that 2 isotopes, aluminum and beryllium, accumulate in the rocks and sediment on the Earth's surface when they're exposed to radiation from space. Over the time, these isotopes decay. Now, because they're different isotopes, they decay at different rates, Christ said. We can use that difference to tell us how long they've been buried. Now, based on the ratio of aluminum to beryllium isotopes in the samples, researchers concluded that the plant fossils collected by Project Iceworm were between a few 100,000 and 1 million years old. Chris said it's possible that the ice sheets vanished more than once in the last 3 million years. We still have 12 feet of the soil to analyze, he said. That might tell us in greater detail how many times the ice has disappeared from this part of Greenland. Already, he added, his study demonstrates that the Greenland's ice sheet is very sensitive to relatively minor changes in climate. Now, Greenland's ice sheet is starting to shrink again. Snowfall is already insufficient to keep up with the pace of the melting, meaning the ice sheets could disappear even if global temperatures stop rising. By the year 2100, the melted ice could raise the sea levels up to 7 inches. When fossilized plants in the samples first bloomed, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere averaged just 230 parts per million. By the time ice samples were taken in the mid-60s, atmospheric conditions or concentrations of carbon dioxide exceeded 320 million parts per million. Today, those concentrations have topped 410 parts per million. So, yeah, the sheets have melted several times, theoretically, over the past million years. Because the Earth heats up, the Earth cools down, it heats up again, cools down. There's nothing new under the sun. Interesting stuff. And to look at the pictures of these plants and stuff, they do look kind of interesting. We've only seen these leaves and things like that in fossilized rocks. Interesting stuff. Well, the days are getting longer, which is a good thing. It's spring. The weather's starting to get better. It's starting to get sunnier. Of course, you know, we're crashing headlong into Easter in a week or two. And one of the things that also happens this week is the spring equinox. And I was looking at, what is this? The Scotsman. The temperature's getting slightly warmer and flowers are beginning to bloom, which is a signal that spring in Scotland is just around the corner. Of course, you know, first day of spring was beginning of March. We are heading into the spring equinox. Now, if you don't understand what the spring equinox is, equinox, of course, means equal, and nox means night. So day and night becoming equal. The spring equinox is essentially just that. The length of the night and daytime become nearly equal, 12 hours each, all around the world. It's caused by the Earth's tilt on its axis as it orbits the sun. Because of that tilt, which is about 23.4 degrees, as our planet goes around the sun, different parts are exposed to more and less sunlight, causing the different seasons. During the autumn and spring equinoxes, the tilt of the Earth axis is perpendicular to the sun's rays. It's kind of interesting. It always falls towards the end of March. Anytime between the 19th and the 21st is the spring equinox. In 2021, astronomers have predicted that the phenomenon this year will occur on the morning of Saturday, March 20th. On this day, the official time for the start of astronomical spring is 9:37 a.m. And that's GMT, which basically is in Ireland. Spring will last then until the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, which falls on Monday, June 21st, and Monday, June 21st, 2021. The spring, that will be the longest day of the year, the summer solstice. But this is the spring solstice. So, yeah, we got a lot going on this week in nature as it happens. And, you know, the weather kind of reflects it too. We've seen this week all extremes. We've had sunshine and beautiful at the beginning of the week. We've had nasty, really horrible weather throughout the middle of the week. There's been tornadoes, all kinds of things happening. Snow in certain places. And yesterday here in the great state of Michigan, we had wind, we had rain. It was nasty and high winds by the time I got home. And by the time I woke up this morning, it was cold, but the sun is shining. It's beautiful. And we are going to warm on up into a really, really beautiful weekend. I'm going to take a break a little bit early, but that's okay because I got a lot more to talk about when we come back. Don't go away. Stay tuned. When we come back, we got a lot more to talk about, including new bike tires. What?
Listen now and don't forget, if you go for that solid jive, you can always keep the dream alive. Palin with Al.
My son was in the Army back during Desert Storm, but even then he wanted an MBA. He looked at a dozen schools, but only one offered the online education and flexibility he needed while he was in a tent in Iraq, Grantham University. Turns out that Grantham's been delivering affordable, relevant college and advanced degrees for over 65 years. Heck, if they can deliver a quality education to a soldier in a tent overseas, think about the flexibility Grantham can offer you so you can earn your degree too. It doesn't matter how complicated or full your life is. If getting a degree is on your bucket list, you'll want to do what my son did. You'll want to call Grantham. Find out how easy it is to get started on your education so you can check that college degree off your bucket list. Call Grantham right now, 800-910-1370. That's 800-910-1370. Flexible, affordable, relevant. Call 800-910-1370.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 1-800-516-7602 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 1-800-516-7602 to take your call right now. Call 1-800-516-7602. That's 1-800-516-7602. Again, 1-800-516-7602.
Attention business owners and independent contractors. This is a money-saving message from Tax Mediation Services. If your business owes $20,000 or more in taxes, we can help you today, right now. Listen, dealing with the IRS is no picnic. It's an intimidating and extremely stressful process, and you don't want to go it alone. Our attorneys know every law, every tax break, and every possible opportunity to help you resolve and reduce your tax debt. And if you owe more than $20,000, you may be at the top of their hit list. So don't take your tax debt lightly, because it will not go away on its own. The IRS can seize your bank accounts, your home, and even shut down your business. Call our tax experts today at 1-800-783-0810 and let us deal with the IRS while you focus on your business. That's 1-800-783-0810. Again, that's 800-783-0810.
Welcome back to I Do This for Free. I am your humble host, Alan Ray. It is the refreshingly non-political podcast about everything else. Let's talk about your brain for a bit. You know, that thing that takes up space between your ears? Yeah, that thing. You know, and let me back up a step here and start talking about, there's always this argument between paper or computers. You know, reading. There is a school of sophisticated book nerds that want the feel of a hard-bound paper book in their hands. I tend to be one of them. Yes, I have a reader. I have an early Amazon reader that I still use to this day. It's kind of cool because you can still see it outside. You know, it's neat to read on. It's convenient. It's got hundreds of books in it. It takes up no space. And that's cool. That's all good. That's all fine. But there is nothing like, especially on a warm summer day, in a hammock under a shade tree, reading a real honest-to-goodness book, especially hardcover. I have my share of books around here. Two of my kids, actually, would rather read books than do just about anything else. That's fine. Writing is the same way. Now, I set up the studio to do recording, writing, podcasting, and it seems like I have failed on the writing end of this, and I've always wondered why. I'm going to get back to it. However, there's something that I do that's kind of odd, and it's kind of old-fashioned, and I used to think it was kind of quaint until recently. I keep notes. I keep notes in real journal, usually leather-bound, halfway decent books. When I record, I write down what settings I use. I write down what I've done. That way I can backtrack and look. Sometimes I just write thoughts and ideas out. Paper, just write them out. Sometimes I go back and visit them. Other times I don't. I ran across this article, and this is in Medical Express. A study of Japanese university students and recent graduates has revealed that writing on physical paper can lead to more brain activity when remembering the information an hour later. Researchers say that the complex spatial and tactile information, good grief, I can't talk today, associated with writing by hand on physical paper is likely what leads to improved memory. Actually, paper is more advanced and useful compared to electronic documents because paper contains more of one-of-a-kind information for stronger memory recall, said Professor Kuniyoshi L. Saki, a neuroscientist at the University of Tokyo and corresponding author of the research recently published in Frontiers in Behavioral, man, I'm having a hard time talking today, must be ready for the weekend, Neuroscience. The research was completed with collaborators from NTT, Data Institute of Management and Consulting. Contrary to the popular belief that digital tools increase efficiency, volunteers who used paper completed the note task about 25% faster than those who used digital tablets or smartphones. That's point one. Don't be afraid to whip out that notebook and write down your notes when you need to remember something. Carrying on. Although volunteers wrote by hand, both with pen and paper or stylus and digital tablet, researchers say paper notebooks contain more complex spatial information than digital paper. Physical paper allows for tangible permanence, irregular strokes, and uneven shapes like folded corners. In contrast, digital paper is uniform, has no fixed position when scrolling, and disappears when you close the app. Our take-home message, said Saki, is to use paper notebooks for information we need to learn or memorize. In a study of 48 volunteers, they read a fictional conversation between characters discussing their plans for 2 months in the near future, including 14 different class times, assignments, due dates, and personal appointments. Researchers performed the pre-test analysis to ensure that the volunteers, all from 18 to 29 years old, and recruited from the university campuses or NTT offices, were equally sorted into 3 groups based on memory skills, personal preferences for digital and or analog methods, gender, age, and other aspects. Volunteers then recorded the fictional schedule using a paper date book and pen, a calendar app on a digital tablet and a stylus, or a calendar app on a large smartphone and a touchscreen keyboard. There was no time limit, and volunteers were asked to record the fictional events in the same way they would for their real-life schedules without extra time to memorize the schedule. After 1 hour, and it included a break and interference tasks, which distracts you from thinking about the calendar, volunteers answered a range of simple and complex multiple-choice questions, like simple questions like, when is the assignment due? Complex questions like, which is the early due date for the assignments? And this was to test their memory of the schedule. While they completed the test, volunteers were inside a magnetic resonance imaging scanner, which measured blood flow around the brain. This is a technique called MRI, of course. An increased blood flow observed in the specific region of the brain is a sign of increased neuronal activity in that area. Participants who used a paper date book filled in the calendar within about 11 minutes. Tablet users took 14 minutes, and smartphone users took an average of 16 minutes. Volunteers who used analog methods in their personal life were just as slow at using the devices as volunteers who regularly use digital tools. So it's not because they were quick writers. It's just a phenomenon that you can write. You can whip out a notebook and write things down quicker than you can bring it up on a tablet, do your thing on a tablet, and then close it. And even quicker, a lot quicker than doing it on a smartphone. So researchers are confident that the difference in speed was related to memorization or associated encoding in the brain, not just differences in the habitual use of the tools. Volunteers who used analog methods scored better than other volunteers only on simple test questions. However, researchers say that the brain activation data reveals significant differences. Volunteers who used paper had more brain activity in areas associated with language, imagery visualization, and in the hippocampus, an area known to be important for memory and navigation. Researchers say that the activation of the hippocampus indicates that analog methods contain richer spatial details that can be recalled and navigated in the mind's eye. Now, they are thinking that this has, and I'm just going to go off of this. I could go on with this research. It's very interesting. They're thinking that because these people were younger, and, a lot of them were in the 29 years of age, brains are still developing, things are still developing, that this could be breakthrough research in how we educate our kids. The old-fashioned way of going back to writing on pen and paper, writing on a paper with your pencil, probably, according to this research, is going to have to start happening for the youth coming up through the grades to have better brain functions, better brain activities. Now, what this means for older people like me, well, I still use good old-fashioned pencil and paper, pen and paper to write things down. Don't be ashamed of it. You're doing your brain a favor, and if somebody disrespects you for using the old-fashioned methods, tell them. Research says what I'm doing is better for my brain than what you're doing. So carry that old-fashioned notebook with pride. In fact, go out and buy, what are those old Mead notebooks, some old nerdy ones that are real thick, and you can store your entire life in just that notebook. Go buy one of those. Carry it around with pride. Speaking of brains, following article, Europe News. Researchers at Catholic University in, the KU Leuven, uncovered for the first time what happens in animals' brains when they learn from subconscious visual stimuli. In time, this knowledge can lead to new treatments for a number of conditions. The study, a collaboration between KU Leuven, Massachusetts General Hospital, and Harvard. Are you a Harvard graduate? It was published in the magazine Neuron. An experienced bird watcher recognized many more details in a bird's plumage than the ordinary person. Thanks to extensive training, he or she can identify specific features in the plumage. This learning process is not only dependent on conscious processes. Previous research has shown that when people are rewarded during the presentation of visual stimuli that are not consciously perceivable, they can still perceive these stimuli afterwards. Although this is a known phenomenon, researchers were unsure as to how exactly this unconscious perceptual learning comes about. To find out, Professor Wim van Duffel, and colleagues studied the brain of two rhesus monkeys before and after they were exposed to subconscious visual stimuli. The researchers activated part of the reward system at the base of the brainstem and ventral tegmental area. This includes cells that produce dopamine, a molecule that is also released when you receive a reward. Dopamine is a crucial messenger molecule of our motor and reward systems and is extremely important for learning and enjoyment, says Van Duffel. Activating the ventral tegmental areas release dopamine, among other things. By stimulating the brain area directly, we can casually link the activity in that area to perception of complex cognitive behavior. While the brain area was activated, the monkeys were shown virtually invisible images of faces, human faces and bodies. Because the images were very blurry and the monkeys had to perform a very different and difficult task at the same time, they could not consciously perceive these images. The same process was followed during the control test, but the brain was not stimulated. When the monkeys received some conscious visual stimuli, while the ventral tegmental area was stimulated, they knew details about those images afterward. For example, they knew whether the bodies shown were turned to the left or to the right. This was not the case when there had been no brain stimulation. Thanks to this experiment, we can demonstrate for the first time a direct causal relationship between this brain region and, as a result, also the likely link between dopamine and the subconscious learning of complex visual stimuli. The parts in the darker color regulate, among others, the production of dopamine. Disturbances in this region can lead to Parkinson's disease and other conditions. We can see the blood flow in the brain, Van Duffel went on to explain, which gives an indication of which neurons are active. The more blood flow, the more activity, like we said in the previous story. The scans showed that the task caused activity in the visual cortex of the brain and in areas important for memory, even in the subconscious level. With this data, we can zoom in to find out what is happening exactly as a neuronal level in the brain areas in future experiments. Since Freud's insight in the 20th century, the scientific community has been wondering how subconscious sensations can affect us. Thanks to the present awareness that there is a strong resemblance between humans and monkeys and new advanced technologies, we can finally map these processes psychologically. So what good is this? Well, it's going to help us understand Parkinson's disease and how we can treat it. It's going to help us understand a lot of learning disabilities, things like that. We are now realizing, it's a useful insight in treating trauma, aging, oncological problems, where an increase in brain plasticity and ability to change this could be very useful. By stimulating these areas of the brain that produce dopamine, we could, for example, enable people to regain speech more quickly or to improve their motor skills after an accident or illness. This could even be done through medication, although we're kind of a long way away from that, explains Van Duffel. So we're on a breakthrough of another, basically, level of brain research between these two articles. It's fascinating in our world here to understand these things. Being a student and actually a fan of psychology, knowing how the brain clicks, knowing how it works, knowing why you remember some things and why you forget some things, what stimulates you, what motivates you, always fascinating to me. And it's one of the reasons I do a show like this, because it makes me dive and delve into these things, keeps my brain stimulated. God knows my brain needs more stimulation. Yes, it does. All right, we study the brain. Let's look at some fun. I'm a runner. Well, recently I haven't been running all that much, but, I'm getting back to it. Weather's breaking. It's nicer out. It's time to hit the trails. It really is. But I also like to bike. Now, what does space travel and bicycling have to do with each other? I'm glad you asked. For years, I found it interesting. When they built the first, basically car for traveling across the surface of the moon, very interesting stuff. They have vehicles up on Mars right now traveling around. In fact, I kept seeing this article today about, because we're sending back recordings from the surface of Mars, we have this interesting recording of the new rover, the machines clunking and clacking across the desert. Okay, that's nice. You want to hear that? Just stick around here. You can hear the train go by. But it's also no secret that space travel, going to space, all of the technology involved in keeping a human alive in the space environment and doing things, research, development, whatever in space, has progressed us down here on Earth as humans. A lot of neat little inventions have come from the space program. This is one of those inventions. from Gizmodo. When you're exploring another planet, the last thing you want to have to deal with is tire damage. When AAA is millions of miles away, right? Am I right? Yep. It's a concern that prompted NASA to develop an airless titanium tire that's flexible like rubber, but nearly indestructible. As has been the case with many of NASA's inventions over the years, that space-age tire technology will soon be able to consumers. Now, using air-filled rubber tires on a vehicle just isn't a practical solution for exploring nearby celestial bodies, whose natural terrain is covered in rocks and sharp objects. So for the handful of wheeled vehicles that NASA has sent to the moon and Mars, metal wheels are a better alternative. For the lunar rover, which Apollo 15 brought to the moon, wheels made of hollow metal springs were created that could absorb bumps to make the ride more comfortable for the astronauts. But most metals lose their shape over time and become brittle when repeatedly flexed, resulting in misshapen wheels that don't roll well at all. Now, even worse, severe damage that prevents them from rolling at all can happen as well. Metal memory is an issue, and you can see that by if you stretch a slinky too far, and eventually the metal coil will be warped so much it won't recoil. As an alternative, NASA has spent several $1 million over the past 7 years developing nitinol, a metal alloy made of titanium, not aluminum, that behaves differently. Metal springs eventually lose their ability to spring back to their original shape because the bonds between their atomic structures become so stretched that they no longer are able to return to their initial arrangements. But nitinol features a more ordered atomic structure and exhibits something known as the shape memory effect, which allows it to be deformed but to return to its original manufacturer shape again and again without permanent damage. It allows metal tires to be created that can deform to absorb the impact of uneven terrain like rubber without the possibility of a flat tire occurring. It's incredible technology that will soon be available in the coming years for a vehicle that will probably never leave Earth's atmosphere: your bicycle. A startup called the Smart Tire Company has announced that it's creating a metal bicycle tire using NASA's nitinol alloy that will never need to be inflated, will never spring a leak, and will probably survive a lot longer than the bicycle itself. Called metal, martensite elasticized tubular loading, that's what the tire's called, METL. Its creators are hopeful it will be available as an alternative to premium bike tires options as early as 2022, next year. It remains to be seen just how much titanium alloy bike tires will cost, but you can assume that it will probably be a long time before kids find a bike with nitinol wheels under their Christmas tree. We're probably talking a few $1,000 here to get them put on your bike. For cyclists who are happy to spend tens of thousands of dollars on their bikes, however, the METL tires, metal tires, could be the last set they ever have to buy, although they'll still require regular maintenance. Why? Well, the most common problem with airless tires is they often feature open structure designs that allow debris to get inside and throw off the balance of the wheel. Using a structure made of metal instead of rubber further complicates things because of the smooth finish of the metal. To solve this, metal tires will also be finished with a rubber-like tread made from a material called polyurethanium that adds grip and makes them suitable for riding on all terrains, including pavement, gravel, and dirt. Over time, that tread will wear out and need to be reapplied, but that maintenance is expected to be a lot cheaper than having to regularly replace a set of tires. Now, the metal tires won't be suitable for every rider. They are, after all, made of metal and are expected to be heavier than the premium lightweight tires used by professional cyclists. But for the most part, other applications, including athletes who use larger bikes on off-road terrains, the tires won't feel any different during the ride. Now, the Smart Tire Company is making a lot of promises about the advantages of nitinol tires over rubber ones. They've got an extensive frequently asked questions on its website, touting the virtues of the technology. And there's good reason to be excited about the technology. Obviously, NASA felt it was important enough to spend millions of dollars on that development. But we've been promised airless tires for many years now, along with flying cars. And industry giants like Bridgestone, who have the manufacturing capabilities to make them a reality, but they're still not here. Not even for bikes, which is about the least of the demanding applications. So this could be the breakthrough. This could be the breaking point. Airless tires. If they put them on bikes, eventually they'll be on cars, trucks, whatever. Never having to air your tires again. In fact, probably, take your tire in, have new tread put on it, put it back on your vehicle eventually. Buy a new vehicle, take the tires off that, put it on that one. If it's the same vehicle, the same size. Interesting stuff. Yeah, I like biking. I really do. And it would be interesting to ride on one of those just to see what the difference in ride really is. See, you're learning all kinds of new stuff you didn't know it. Speaking of the physical, scientists have figured out a way to speed up muscle repair. Again, we're making great strides. And let me chase a rabbit here for a minute. Sometimes I look across this great nation and I read the 6 o'clock news or look at the 6 o'clock news, read the papers, and I think, oh my gosh, we're doomed as a species because it seems like people get dumber and dumber every day. But when you look behind the scenes, there's still a large group of people who dedicate their lives, dedicate their time, dedicate their efforts, focus their energies on figuring problems out and making the world a better place. And I applaud those people. I really, really do. And if you're one of those people, you have my total respect. You give me faith in humanity once again. A study led by researchers at University of California, San Diego, Jacobs School of Engineering provides new insight for developing therapies for muscle disease, injury, and atrophy. By studying how different pluripotent stem cells lines build muscles, researchers have for the first time discovered how epigenetic mechanisms can be triggered to accelerate muscle cell growth at different stages of stem cell differentiation. Now, the findings were published in March 17th in Science Advances. And Shankar Subramaniam, distinguished professor of bioengineering and computer science and engineering and cellular and molecular medicine at UC San Diego, and lead corresponding author on the study, says stem cell-based approaches that have the potential to aid muscle regeneration and growth would improve the quality of life for many people, from children who are born with congenital muscle diseases to people who are losing muscle mass and strength due to aging. Here we have discovered that specific factors and mechanisms can be triggered by external means to favor rapid growth. Now, the researchers used 3 different human-induced pluripotent stem cell lines and studied how they differentiate into muscle cells. Out of the 3, one cell line grew into muscle the fastest. The researchers looked at what factors made this line different from the others, and they induced these factors in other lines to see if they could accelerate muscle growth. They found that triggering several epigenetic mechanisms at different time points sped up muscle growth in the slower pluripotent stem cell lines. Now, a key takeaway here is that all pluripotent stem cells do not have the same capacity to regenerate. And this is what the Professor Subramanian said. Identifying factors that will prime these cells for specific regeneration will go a long way in regenerative medicine. Next, the team will explore therapeutic interventions such as drugs that can stimulate and accelerate muscle growth at different stages of differentiation in human-induced pluripotent stem cells. They will also see whether implanting specific pluripotent stem cells in dystrophic muscle can stimulate new muscle growth in animals. Ultimately, they would like to see if such a stem cell-based approach could regenerate muscle in aging humans. So there we go. Between the brain studies and the muscle studies, these are huge. People who are injured, who lose basically muscle flexing problems. People have degenerative muscle diseases, things like this. To be able to stimulate new muscle growth, to be able to stimulate this regrowth, and really, honestly, if you're a bodybuilder, this should really interest you. Because what it all boils down to, when you're a weightlifter, what you're doing is you're shredding your muscle cells. You're basically ripping your muscles, and it's rebuilding back with new tissue. That's kind of a vague way of describing it. If they could find a way to make these muscles grow back quicker, athletes, bodybuilders, people with degenerative muscle diseases, people who are born with muscle issues, this could be a huge, huge scientific advance for these people. It's out there, folks. Not everything in this world is bad news. We have people working on stuff that are absolutely phenomenal. Whether it be never having to put air in your bicycle tires again, whether it be building new muscles, whether it be expanding your brain, your consciousness, and being able to remember things more clearly for much longer. It's out there. It's out there. You know what else is out there? Silliness. I have never been in a Zoom meeting, ever. Hopefully I never will have to be. My days of having pointless meetings with people who really don't know what they're talking about have been over for quite some time. I came close to having a Zoom meeting, but it wasn't really a meeting. It was a friendly chat with an old friend of mine who has been on this show, Heather. She's been on my show a couple of times, and we had a good time. We had a good meeting. It wasn't really a meeting, though. It was kind of a morning coffee. Hey, how's it going? We're all still alive. We're all doing okay. And we're all getting older, and my beard's getting longer, and etc. But I've never had to sit through a Zoom meeting. Somebody, and this was inevitable, during this lockdown, Zoom meetings have become more and more important. Zoom schools, whatever. Somebody has developed an app. If you have had enough of Zoom meetings for the day and just wanted to leave the next call but don't have an excuse, this app has your back. Meet Zoom Escaper, a free widget that lets you add fake audio sounds to your call so that you have a valid excuse to leave an online meeting or escape. There are several sounds you can choose from, such as barking dogs, construction noises, crying babies, or even a bad connection sounds that you can leave the call without having anyone suspect you. The app has been created by Sam Levine and is quite easy to use. All you need to do is download an additional audio software called VB Audio that can route audio through the website. You just need to select audio input in Zoom or any other online meeting client from your microphone to VB Audio and then play the audio effect. If you need a more visual tutorial, there's videos out there that shows you what you can do. It's worth pointing out that while using Zoom Escaper, you can't hear the sound effects yourself, but it does work. You can test it out for yourself by getting on a call with a friend and adding two of your accounts on different devices to see how it works. Other sounds you can play around with are man weeping, urination, wind blowing, echoes, barking dogs, and upset babies. Probably the bad connection and upset baby sound are the most convincing. However, you need people on the other side of the call to believe that you have a baby first. Needless to say, we advise using the app at your own risk. Test it out before you actually try to pull this thing off. Having said that, I think this app's going to be big. It's going to be huge. But just don't get caught. So glad you joined me for I Do This for Free. I'm Alan Ray. It's going to be a great weekend. Sun's going to be out. Going to be shining. It's going to be beautiful. Enjoy it. Get out there. Live your life. Try and realize that it's all not collapsing around us, and be part of the solution, not part of the problem. God bless you. God bless America. Keep it locked on KLRNRadio, America's podcast network, all week long. I will see you Sunday night for Circumspice, the right side of Michigan.